Today I have something super special for you, the world debut for mango baklawa. It's a layered baklawa dessert filled with sweet mango and whipped cream. Now before I get attacked by baklawa purists, no, this does not contain any nuts. Yes, this is a form of baklawa. No, this is not a Turkish or historical recipe. Yes, this is a real thing that we eat in Egypt, and yes, it is one of the greatest desserts in existence. For context, this recipe is originally a Ramadan treat, but because mango season no longer falls in Ramadan, I thought it would make a great summer dessert as well. It has all the right textures and can even be made with any sort of seasonal fruit. If you're new here, I'm Obi, and today I'm going to show you how to make an amazing mango baklawa which you could customize with infinite possibilities. Now, let's get started. I like to think of this dessert as the Middle Eastern version of a pavlova, and today we'll be making this with mangoes, but this would also go great with any sort of berry or stone fruit. Now to get a lot of mango flavour into the baklawa, we'll make a sugar syrup and infuse it with the mango. Then we'll use it on the pastry, in the cream, and of course to coat the fruit itself. First thing we need are the mangoes, and if you can, get yourself some Egyptian, Indian or Pakistani mangoes, as most other mangoes just don't taste of anything. My rule is that if you can't smell the scent of a mango from arm's length, then it's not a variety worth buying. These ones are a little old and wrinkly, but you can tell it's a good mango because of this sap stain which shows that the mango is really sweet. It's normal for them to be a bit bruised or spotty, and you can usually find these Indian or Pakistani mangoes at their grocery stores between May and July. I'd completely avoid South American mangoes for this recipe just because I find they don't have a strong enough flavour. So how do you prepare a mango like this? First, I'd highly recommend a serrated kitchen knife, as they're able to get grip on the slippery meat of a mango much better than a regular knife. And I start by slicing the bottom off the mangoes. Stand it up and peel the skin off of both sides before removing both cheeks off the mango. Simply slice from the top of the mango to the bottom while pressing against the pit to get as much of the mango flesh as possible. You should also get the remaining flesh around the pit by cutting against it at an angle. Once you've done that, chop your mango into even cubes like this. You should also take the skin and scrape it with a spoon to remove any pulp that's left there, and we'll be using that to infuse the syrup. In total I used 6 of these Pakistani mangoes, which weighed around 1¼ kilos, and I ended up with about 700 grams of mango cubes and about 100 grams of mango pulp from the skins. In terms of the syrup, it's basically a batch and a half of the sugar syrup from my dessert essentials video, but this one is infused with the mango pulp. Place a pot on the stove on high heat and add in 375 grams or 13 ounces of sugar, 225 milliliters or 7.6 fluid ounces of water, and 3/4 of a tablespoon of lemon juice. Bring this to a boil, then swirl the pot to dissolve any remaining sugar. Now add in 75 to 100 grams or 2.5 to 3.5 ounces of mango pulp, stir the pot briefly and turn the heat to low. Let this simmer on low for about 15 minutes. When the time is up, add in 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla essence and let it simmer for 1 minute further. Finally, place a fine mesh sieve over a bowl or jug and pour the syrup through it so that the sieve removes all of the mango pieces. You'll be left with a clear golden syrup like this, which is fully infused with the flavour of mango. This will add so much mango flavour to our dessert, and it could even be used to make mango bubble tea. Obviously, if you use a different fruit, it might end up really dark, so keep that in mind because it will stain the baklawa later. One other thing we'll need to prep is some clarified butter, but we won't be clarifying this all the way. Place a 250 gram or 8 ounce stick of butter in a pot over high heat and melt it completely. Once melted, turn the heat to medium-low and let this simmer for a few minutes. Once the fat has separated from the milk and you can see 2 distinct liquids in the pot, take a jug or bowl and pour out just the melted fat. As you get to the end of the pot, leave all the white milk behind and any fat which is hard to remove. This will serve perfectly for the pastry, and you can use the leftovers just like any other butter. I've chosen to make this baklawa in a circular baking dish which is 10 inches or 25 centimeters in diameter. If you want to make a smaller one, you can halve the ingredients for a 7-inch baking dish, and if you want to only do 1 layer of pastry, you can halve the pastry and syrup ingredients once more. You can also make this in a rectangular baking dish, which will be easier to prepare, and you can cut this into square slices. I'm going to be using a 400g packet of Turkish Phyllo pastry for this recipe, which you can get frozen, but I'd highly recommend the fresh refrigerated kind. Your Phyllo will be super thin and it's quite delicate, so handle it gently. Each packet will contain about 12 to 20 sheets of Phyllo. To prep this, I place my baking dish on top of the pastry, and if I cut it in half, I should be able to get 2 circles from each sheet. Once it's cut in half, I place the tray on top of the pastry and traced around the tray with my knife to get circular sheets, which are the perfect size for my tray. Of course, there will be loads of offcuts when cutting a circle, which you can sprinkle with olive oil and salt before baking for a quick Phyllo snack. Once you've cut your circles, take the pan and liberally brush it with a clarified butter, making sure to coat the base and the walls of the pan. The butter will stop the pastry from sticking and will ensure it crisps up well. Add your first sheet of pastry on top of the butter and center it along the base of the pan. Next, take a pastry brush and coat the top of that pastry sheet in a layer of clarified butter. You don't want it to be swimming in butter, but you need to apply a coating across the whole sheet and the edges so that the next sheet sticks to it. Now you'll take another sheet and place it on top of the first sheet, making sure to line it up well. This process is what's called lamination, and it allows the Phyllo pastry to puff up once baked. There is a little hack which I forgot to do at first, but you want to take 2 strips of parchment paper and lay them across your tray like this. These will act as a handle and allow us to pull out the pastry without breaking it after it has baked. I removed my pastry, placed the parchment paper and buttered them up before carrying on with the lamination. You can add as many layers as you want to this pastry, but I'd recommend a minimum of 8 layers, and in my one I did about 12. Make sure you liberally brush each layer with the clarified butter before adding on the next one, and try to keep them as aligned as possible. Here's my completed baklawa tray, and I'm going to be making 2 trays like this, one for the bottom of the baklawa and one for the top. For a simpler version, you can just do a bottom layer and it will still turn out great. The top layer will have to be pre-cut into slices, otherwise it will fall apart or it will squeeze out the cream when we go to cut it. Use a sharp knife to cut through most of the layers of pastry, but try not to go all the way through so it's easier to remove later. To bake these, preheat your oven to 160 degrees Celsius or 320 degrees Fahrenheit with the fan on. Once it's ready, place your tray into the oven to bake for 25 to 30 minutes. When the timer is up, your pastry should have puffed and turned golden like this. As soon as you remove it from the oven, pour about 75 milliliters of the syrup evenly over the entire thing. If it's hot enough, the pastry will sizzle as it absorbs the syrup. You should leave this to cool for at least 15 to 20 minutes before you remove it from the tray, and it should cool completely before you assemble the final dish. The last component is the whipped cream, and you can make a basic whipped cream with a little bit of the syrup, but this one is a bit more stable and will last longer in the fridge without deflating. In a stand mixer or in a bowl, add 125 grams of mascarpone, clotted cream or fresh ishtar, then pour in 250 to 300 grams of double or heavy cream. To sweeten it, add 3 tablespoons of the mango syrup, then all that's left is to whisk this together. You can definitely whisk this by hand, but it might take a while longer, or you can use a stick blender with a whisk attachment. Just make sure to whisk this on a low speed, because as soon as it comes together into this fluffy and spreadable texture, the cream is done. Finally, there's one thing I'd recommend doing, and that's glazing the chopped mango. This is done to prevent the mango topping from wilting quickly, but it is 100% optional. Just pour the remaining syrup over the mango and strain off any excess syrup using a colander, and that's the glazing done. For final assembly, get a plate large enough for the baklawa, and then you'll need some help to lift it from the tray onto the plate. Once you've centered it, remove the parchment paper by pulling it out, and we can now add the toppings. Add your cream to the center of the baklawa and spread it out towards the edge of the pastry. Don't go all the way to the end, as the weight of the mango will still spread it out even further. Now take your glazed mango and add it on top of the cream, making sure to spread it into an even layer like this. Finally, you can take the top layer of pastry if you've made one, and then carefully position it on top of the mango. To decorate it, I've added a pile of mango to the center of the top layer, and then I've sprinkled it with a little bit of pistachio dust for some contrasting colour. Now that is a thing of beauty. It's truly a dessert which deserves center place on a dinner table. This baklawa is ready to eat right away, and to serve it just use a serrated knife to cut through the pastry. I'd recommend you make this on the day you're going to eat it so that it stays really crispy, but it will last up to 3 days in the fridge. Now that you've seen it, I'm sure you're thinking of loads of other flavours that you can make for this baklawa. Now, let's check out the taste test. This is still crispy 1 day later. Probably easier to just pick this whole thing up. This is simply as delicious to eat as it is messy. You get the wonderful top and bottom layers of pastry, which are crispy and flaky just like any other baklawa. Then you get the cream filling and a wonderful serving of the mango, which if you've ever had real mangoes, you'll know it tastes heavenly. Combined, the textures and flavours work perfectly together, and the mango syrup just takes the whole thing to the next level. Rather than making a pavlova or a fruitcake for your next dinner party, give this a try and use whatever seasonal fruit you have. Tag me on Instagram if you make this baklawa, and let me know what you think of it in the comments below. Thanks to our amazing patrons for making this video possible, and if you enjoyed it and want to support the channel, then consider joining them. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back next week with another video.